Hey there, and welcome to Hormonally Speaking. I'm your host, Christine Garvin, a functional health coach. Each week, I speak with an incredible guest expert on all things women's hormones. We're here to empower you to take back control of your body, health, and well-being, and to learn about the latest in research and solutions when it comes to getting your hormones happy. No part of this podcast should be construed as medical advice, and we always recommend working with a professional practitioner to figure out what's best for your body. Now let's dive in with today's guest. Hi, and welcome to the final episode of 2022 on Hormonally Speaking. Hope that you are having a wonderful week between Christmas and New Year's. Hopefully it's some slow downtime for you. Because, that's what winter should be. We should be doing some relaxing after a very full and tumultuous year for a lot of us. So this episode is really just about looking back at 2022 when it comes to Hormonally Speaking. And it's been really fun for me to go through and figure out which were the top 10 episodes of the year. So it gives me information about what you guys want to hear. And it also is just fun for me to go back and realize how much incredible information our really awesome guests have shared with us, right? Because there's a lot to know about hormones and health. And if you're like me, it's exciting to always learn new things and then also go back and be like, hearing something and be like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. That is something easy and simple that I can do. Or maybe this is an angle I haven't thought about when it comes to my health. So that's what today is about, just bringing in some of those bits and pieces from the top 10 episodes this year. So basically, we've got about 1 to 2 minutes of each of the top 10 episodes. I'm going to do a little intro into each. And then I highly recommend, this is a good way to determine which episode you want to go back and listen to, or if you want to listen to all 10. There will be links to each of those episodes in the notes so that you can easily find them. I know sometimes the search tool on podcasting is not easy at all. I don't know why they don't have a better search function. So those links will be there for you to get you directly to where you need to go. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this year's top 10 episodes. So of course, we're going to do a little countdown here. We're going to start with the number 10 most listened to episode this year, which was season 4, episode 11. And it is titled Learn the Real Deal About Bioidentical HRT or Hormone Replacement Therapy in Perimenopause with Jill Chmielewski. This is a fabulous episode if you are wanting to know what's up with using those bioidentical hormones. Here we go.
Most of the studies show it's in the years before menopause where women are apt to gain the most weight. And it's
interesting.
Yeah, it's not just it's not just the weight, it's
Right.
the body composition changes,
Right.
which are really hard to see for women, you
Right.
know? So
Right, absolutely.
yeah, skin changes, vaginal changes, even maybe more uncomfortable sex, maybe more yeast infections, meaning the pH of the vagina changes as hormones change. So these are the kinds of things where women say, I'm things are changing down there, but I don't know exactly what it is. So that's where we get those kind of heavy hitter physiological symptoms. Although, it's interesting, about 75% of women experience symptoms and 25% don't. Which,
wow, I'm surprised it's that high.
I know. And we always sort of say the women who experience symptoms are the lucky ones, because you want to be thinking about this, that we're all having the same physiologic things are happening behind the scenes. So when hormones change in our 40s, we're going to start to have bone loss, muscle loss, like all these things are happening.
Right.
But if you don't have symptoms, you may not be cluing into it. So even though I'm sure your listeners are not excited about those changes, it's a good thing. We need to be paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was Jill Chmielewski with our number 10 episode of the year, which was Learn the Real Deal about Bioidentical HRT and Perimenopause. Don't forget, the link is in the show notes, so you can go directly there. Definitely a favorite episode of mine, and I've heard a lot of good feedback about that one, so tune in if you can. All right, next up, our number 9 episode of 2022 was season 3, episode 21, which was Restore Your Metabolism with Dr. Ashley Dwyer. So Dr. Ashley is super fun, super entertaining. I love watching her Instagram reels, but she's like on her game, you know? So this one is a fabulous episode to understanding that weight loss is not about calories in, calories out. Building your body up sometimes means you need to actually eat more calories, that you need to get your body out of the old mentality that it may be stuck in of dieting, right? And that all the things that dieting can unfortunately do to our metabolism over time. So we dive deep into all of that, understanding that, of course, that's a huge part of hormones too. So really enjoyed this episode. Here's a part where Ashley and I talked about intermittent fasting and the truth about it.
Fasting was designed for like digestive health, autophagy, longevity, things of that nature. It's really only studied in males. Yep. So a lot of these diets are only studied in males, right? Yep. So when women want to pick up the same thing, it gained its popularity because it just shortened your window of eating, which means caloric deficit, right?
Exactly.
That's why it works.
Yeah.
However, when you're already eating too little and then you shorten that window even more, A, that's going to be a big problem for your metabolism and your stress levels. Mm-hmm. And B, that fasting component is actually driving up cortisol and making everything else worse in your body. So you end up being hungrier, binging. Sometimes you'll even lose your hunger cues because of what's going on and just being in chronic dieting. Because so when people are like, well, I'm just not hungry in the morning, or I just don't get hungry anymore, I'm like, that's a bad sign. Like that's a red flag to me, is when we don't have hunger cues anymore.
Next up, we have our number 8 episode of the year, which was season 3, episode 13, Underlying Causes of Chronic Health Issues with Dr. Tanisha Wards. So we dove deep into chronic stuff like Hashimoto's. You'll hear in this clip how Dr. Wards dealt with her own Hashimoto's, and also how fascinating it is when you go to the doctor and don't get all that you need in terms of testing around thyroid and understanding around the impact that thyroid dysfunction can have on our mental as well as physical health. So we dive into that in this little clip right here.
And what's also interesting, and I know you've seen this, is the TSH could be fine.
Exactly. 100%. And especially in their wide range. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they have an autoimmune disorder. So they're going like this. I've had numerous patients get misdiagnosed with bipolarism, and it was Hashimoto's, because you could be high on Monday and you could be low on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And I've seen the TSH swing that far that you look hypo one day and hyper the next day. Like it's real.
It's crazy. Yeah. Can I ask you, I know that obviously there's probably a whole comprehensive thing that you did to get those antibodies down, but what are some of the big things that you recommend for people to do?
Glutathione is my biggest one. I use a cream topically as well as
on your thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
On the thyroid, glutathione cream. Yes, it smells kind of like sulfur. So it doesn't smell great, but it's worth it.
You got to deal.
Oral glutathione at the same time. And if you can, intravenous glutathione will flush that inflammation, because the body's doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
It's attacking something that's inflamed or it could have an infection in it. I definitely think that EBV correlates with it. So the body's it's doing what it's supposed to do. It sees it as an enemy and attacks it. So we need to lower the inflammation to lower the attack also. If the person's not off gluten, going off gluten, we don't know exactly why, but the thyroid is inflamed by gluten, and it's partially because of a similar molecular structure to some of the cells. Other than that, we don't know much more, but we know that gluten, attacks it or inflames it. So getting off gluten is a big one.
Yeah.
And then I like to use the animal extract of a thyroid to act as a decoy. Synthroid could be used for this. I use a product by Standard Process called Thytrophin that has sheep thyroid in it. So it's a decoy.
Woo, that was mind-blowing stuff about the thyroid and Hashimoto's, right? Great episode to go back and listen to if you do have thyroid concerns. That was number 8, the underlying causes of chronic health issues with Dr. Tanisha Wards. Okay, up next at number 7, we have season 3, episode 20, which was with my coach, actually, my personal trainer, Cynthia Sims, and the episode was entitled Using Mindset, Protein, and Weight Training to Craft Your Body. This is where it's at, you guys. This is the important stuff when it comes to taking your body to the next level, if that's where you want to go. Even if you don't want to train your body, say, as hard as a personal trainer does, weight training is going to be the number one thing to help your bone health for the rest of your life, particularly if you're post 40. If you're not 40 yet, start getting on top of your game. And then protein. I talk about it all the time here on the podcast. So necessary for good hormone health. So enjoy this little clip with Cynthia Sims.
You have to be self-disciplined. It's literally, if there is something that you really want, no matter what it is, you have to be self-disciplined enough to make that happen. Put it on your schedule like it's part of your work life, part of your work day. But that is something that you don't skip out on to be like, oh, I just need a little extra sleep. Or, which, I mean, maybe you do need extra sleep. I mean, we all have to give ourselves those times, but excuses.
Yeah.
Like we really have to just stop making excuses for ourselves to move.
Yeah.
But having a buddy, like you train with a friend, you come to me together with a friend, and you'll like push each other, you motivate each other. So buddy system to work out with. I mean, I think that's really great, especially sometimes women, they feel if they don't really know what they're doing in the gym, like where do you start?
Yeah. Okay, next up, we have the number 6 episode of the season, which was with myself, because sometimes I do this podcasting thing on my own, as you well know, if you have been tuning in for a while. So that episode was season 3, episode 15, and I talked all about understanding your serum, aka blood labs that you get done with your doctors, so that you know what to ask your doctor, because a lot of times things, come back to the doctor, and if everything is in range, they say it's good to go. I often even have clients come to me with labs and things are out of range, and their doctor has still said things are good to go. Here's the deal. Reference ranges for labs are huge, and that does not mean because you're in reference range that you're actually in optimal or even good health, right? There are definitely lots of space for highs and lows within that reference range. That means that you're actually on a track for some issues if you don't already have those issues. So from a functional perspective, we look at a much tighter optimal range, and that's what I break down for you in this episode. So I hope you enjoy it. Myself and my clients, one of the biggest underlying things for your health is how your blood sugar is doing. That can tell us so much before it ever gets to even pre-diabetes, much less full-blown diabetes, right? You really want to pay attention to these numbers in a much bigger way than I think sometimes people recognize or realize. So I always, like I said, look to my blood sugar numbers first, but not just glucose. So let me explain. Glucose is a great marker, and it's pretty much on every lab, that people get done. And it's going to tell you your blood sugar at draw time, right? So here's another thing. Doctors used to tell you to fast before taking blood labs. But I've learned over recent times that is much less of a recommendation now. A lot of times doctors don't mention that you need to fast or don't think you need to fast. And if you don't fast, your blood glucose number can be, kind of high. Just as a quick note, that last clip can be seen on the YouTube video of this episode. So you can actually see the numbers that I'm talking about, not just listen to them. And then we also have the entire video from this episode on YouTube. So you can just look up Understanding Serum Blood Labs so that you know what to ask your doctor. if you want to check out all of the things that I covered in that episode. Okay, so now we're up to number 5 of 2022, which was also with me. It was season 3, episode 12, and it was called Boundaries, Fibroids 101, Gut Health, and Quick Update with Kasey Kasem. So in this clip, you're going to hear me talk about boundaries and how important they are when it comes to true stress reduction. It's what's the most overlooked and underrated thing about stress that I see in women's lives, in my clients and my friends, etc. And so it's such a thing that I will underline again and again. I hope you get how important it is, even just from this clip right here. I encourage my clients as much as they can to, actually disconnect from life when possible, because that is one of the big things that our hormones really, really need, to truly disconnect. So if you're going to take a vacation, take a vacation. And I've been bad about this for years. I always take my computer. I always do work, because that's kind of the culture that we live in, right? You got to just kind of be there for when people want to find you and contact you and hear back from you. And I bring this up in particular because, in the past few years, I've really understood how important boundaries are, not just for sort of the sake of boundaries, but truly for your hormone health. And when it comes to, your adrenals in particular, learning how to set boundaries is going to be the biggest game changer in order to sort of establish a good cortisol pattern in your life. Sleep is important, rest is important, but these boundaries is where I find that women see the biggest changes the most quickly when they start to set them. Because when you start to set boundaries in your life, you are pulling back energy into yourself, right? It's so often that we are giving away this energy all of the time, and we wonder why we are depleted. Our number 4 episode of 2022 is another one of my favorites because it is with Dr. Pamela Smith, who is one of the lead instructors at A4M, which is the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, and is really the premier place for doctors and practitioners to understand and learn about all of the things that are coming out when it comes to anti-aging. And I'm not talking about anti-aging in terms of getting fillers in our faces to make us look younger. It is about the things that we can do from the inside out to not only maintain our vitality, but also our zest for life and just feeling good as long as we possibly can, right? It's not about just living long, it's about feeling good living long. And Dr. Pamela Smith continues after, I think it's 30 plus years of being a doctor, maybe even 40 years, she continues to see patients along with instructing on all of these anti-aging approaches. I'm excited to do additional training with A4M, hopefully in 2023. So this was just a profound episode for me to be able to talk with Dr. Smith about all things anti-aging, including bioidentical hormones.
This is so exciting, because when we look at a precision anti-aging approach, it is very science-based. There's many studies now to show that hormone replacement for women and actually hormone replacement for men is a necessity to help maintain memory and to help prevent heart disease.
This next episode, which was our 3rd highest rated episode of 2023, is going to blow your mind if you have dealt with breast cancer, if you have anyone in your family who's dealt with breast cancer, and you are concerned with anyone dealing with breast cancer in the future, because there are natural techniques that are very much backed by utilizing testing and medicine that are outside of the norms. And this guest, Katrina Foe, is so good at explaining them because she went through the process herself and she uses it with her breast cancer clients. Pretty amazing stuff. I was definitely just blown away listening to all of the information that she shared in this episode. So if this is on your radar, listen to this episode. It was season 3, episode 10, Healing Breast Cancer Naturally with Katrina Foe.
And what they do is they take your blood and they extract out the cancer cells. So everybody has circulating cancer tumor cells that usually the immune system should be able to get. Autophagy and things like that can really help, but it should be addressed.
Right.
And so it will take them out and they culture it. And then they can test it against substances that are known in the medical literature to address cancer, to kill it. So you can test the chemos, or you can test the extracts, or you can test both. And this just begs the question, like, why is every oncologist not using
doing this? Yeah.
No, I think it's better just give them 3 different chemos that I make 3 times the money on, instead of testing and seeing which one's going to be effective for them.
Okay, next up, our number 2 episode is one that was such a favorite of mine, not only because this person is such a good practitioner and such a amazing person, but it's a thing that I think is not thought about a lot when it comes to your hormone health, and that is your attachment style. And if you don't know what your attachment style is, listen in to this one. A lot of talk has, happened in the past few years about attachment styles, but particularly if you are of the anxious attachment style, that can really impact your hormones. And so your relationships that you have and how you're attached to your partner or your friends and all those kinds of things can really impact what happens in your hormone life. And so I dive into that in this episode with Elizabeth Gillette.
Regardless of what your attachment style is, you're going to experience stress, but some of us internalize the stress and some of us externalize the stress, right? And so that's really something to pay attention to and notice. And I think especially for people who have the anxious style, you might feel that stress more acutely. You might be able to recognize it more acutely, but people who have the anxious style, the avoidant style also have stress, right? They're just managing it differently. And
maybe pushing it down a little bit more.
Pushing it down. That's exactly right. Whereas people with anxious style tend to really amplify those feelings of stress, and that can make it feel even worse, right? But it's like, that's what we need to do to get the care that we deserve to have, right? Or the recognition that we need in our relationships.
And finally, here it is, our number 1 episode of 2022. It was season 3, episode 11, How Your Genes Impact Your Menstrual Cycle, with Christina Sanders. This was a big one in blowing open the specifics around genetics. I think so many people think, oh yeah, my genes made this happen, but it really is about understanding your genes and particularly nutritionally understanding what you may be deficient in, what support you may need in order to better support your body to not develop diseases. So just because the gun is loaded doesn't mean the trigger is pulled, right? That's all about how we eat and live and the toxins that we have in our environment. And so this episode was such a good way to express all of that using your genes in an empowering way and being empowered by the information that you can get from genetic testing around nutrition. So definitely a favorite of several people that reach out to me, thanked me for this episode. Hope you enjoy this little clip and listen to the whole thing with Christina Sanders.
Methylation is, as I said, responsible for DNA repair, for making new DNA. It also can affect how we respond to stress, how we handle inflammation. And it's a process of turning on or turning off genes. And so by optimizing methylation, you can decrease your risk of chronic disease. So the two things really do work together. I think the easiest way to explain it is if you were to think about a relay race. So if you were to imagine 3 laps around a track, and the way the methylation process works, and the big gene that people talk about when they hear about methylation is MTHFR. So if we can talk about that too a little bit if you want to, but the methylation process is like a relay going around a track 3 times.
Okay.
So at the beginning, in your first lap, you have folate. which is what starts the process.
Okay.
And folate kind of enters the track, takes the baton, and kind of heads off running. And in that first cycle, which is the folate lap, MTHFR is the gene that will act on folate to metabolize it.
Okay.
And it's working it around the track, getting it ready to pass off to the next cycle, which is the methionine cycle, to make methionine. And the third lap, the baton gets passed, and the third lap is the transsulfuration pathway, with the end result being glutathione. Okay. So methylation starts with folate and ends with glutathione. Okay. So that's essentially what you're trying to create.
That's it, you guys. That was our top 10 episodes of 2022. I hope you enjoyed going down memory lane with me, and I hope you listen to those episodes this vacation time. If you're on vacation, if you're not, just listen to them whenever you can. And I wanted to thank you for listening this year. As you probably have heard, we were a top 20% most shared globally and most followed podcasts according to Spotify. So that's a big deal. And if you weren't listening, then that wouldn't happen. I would love, as a late birthday present for me, my birthday was on the 25th, if you haven't left a review, to leave a review, particularly if you're on iTunes, because that does help us continue to grow in 2023. I'm hoping we make top 10 and even top 5% next year, thanks to you listening and sharing the podcast. One other quick thing to note, I do have a free workshop that is happening on January 3rd, and this is all about jumping into the new year feet first in terms of taking care of your hormones, but in that way that we need to, and not the simple fix, right? So it's called 5 Keys to Make Your Menstrual Cycle Flow in 2023, because you need to do these things in order to make your cycle actually be better, and not even just better, but like a really cool part of your monthly life. It is possible to get there, and these are the foundations I use in my own life. These are the foundations I use with all of my clients who successfully have gotten to having better periods, to having more energy, to enjoying their cycle and the whole process instead of hating it, right? So I hope to see you there. If you go to my website, christinegarvin.com, you can grab a spot. It is on January 3rd at 12 p.m. And yes, there will be a replay that's available for 24 hours if you aren't able to make that time, but you got to sign up and grab a spot if you want that replay. So have a great new year, and I will see you here next week with a brand new episode, and we've got lots of other fun things coming up in 2023. I'll see you then.